MSP live stream this evening. Of course, this is the pre-show where we count down that little 5-minute timer to make sure that, we're ready to go. So I'm going to hop over here and check the live streams and make sure that they're working. Let's see. And yep, it's working. I can hear myself, which is never a good thing, but thank goodness I can mute it. Let's see. Let's check LinkedIn. That one is working as well. And last but not least, yep, Facebook appears to be working as well. So let's go ahead and do a shout out to all the streams. See if that comment goes out to everybody. I have a new button for that, by the way. If you don't have a Stream Deck, you're missing out. Even if you don't live stream, the Stream Deck, having shortcuts to just Word, Excel, and everything else that I use every day, it's awesome for that. And they make them in different sizes, and so that, whatever. They make one to fit your needs, and they're just fun. They're fun. All right. Well, I'm not sure if that comment went out. Oh well. Let me do some comments here. Let's see, that's hey YouTube. Because I do like to make sure that the comments are showing up in my feed so that we know we can respond to them. And this is LinkedIn. Helps if you spell LinkedIn correctly. And last but not least, Facebook. All right, so comments are working on all three. We do have a couple of people watching. That's awesome. Really do appreciate that. We're going to have a good time tonight. We have some great information tonight and a sneak peek into CompTIA's State of the Channel for 2023. This is something that I've used year after year as an MSP and as a vendor to kind of know where the market's going, what my peers are doing, what my competition is doing, so that I can kind of pretty much get my go-to-market strategy together for the next 6 to 12 months, from report to report. All right, so we got about 2 minutes left. So as soon as we get to that 2-minute mark, everything looks like it's working. I tell you, compared to the last couple of weeks when nothing was working right, this is actually, pleasant. We're getting back into the rhythm. We had a couple of weeks there where we were off, and I think that killed the magic. So we're getting back into our stride. We have guests lined up now through the end of May. So, and if you want to be a guest, by the way, because MSPs can be guests. It's not just vendors. It's not just industry experts like we have on tonight. We want real MSPs on this show as well, because what you guys are dealing with day in and day out is important to the rest of the community. And so sharing that is vitally important. All right, getting down to the last minute. If you're here and you're watching, go ahead and put something in the comments. Let us know you're here so that we know who's here. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the comments as well, because I'm sure that the data that we're going to show tonight is probably going to have some interesting commentary and some interesting questions. So like I said, this is going to be a sneak peek. You have to wait, and I'll let Carolyn tell some more about when the report's going to be released and stuff like that. But, this, like I said, this is something that I look forward to every year because it is just chock full of important information that is really helpful, regardless of whether you're an MSP in this channel, a consultant, a vendor. This information is vitally important to the way that you do business over the next couple of months. Countdown's down to 0. Let's do this thing. All right, welcome back everybody to All Things MSP, the live stream edition. We are here tonight to talk about some data, some really cool data. And if you're watching, please go ahead and let us know in the comments. If you're not aware of All Things MSP, if this is your first time watching, the first time you've heard about All Things MSP, we started as a Facebook group. Okay, so we've got about, I think we're close to 4,400 members or something like that now. It's over the years, it's just grown and grown, and it's so exciting to see all of the people interacting in that group. So make sure that you reach out to the group, join the group, and because that's where we have all of the really good conversations are in that group. Now, we also have a page on LinkedIn so people can connect with us there, and we have the YouTube channel, which I just recently rebranded away from my personal channel, and it is now officially called the All Things MSP channel. And so check it out. There's just resources there for MSPs. All of these live streams are there, so you can go back and watch some of the ones we've done on marketing, things like that. And if you haven't caught it, Justin Esgar and I just started doing the All Things MSP podcast. We release it every Tuesday, so one just came out yesterday. We post those on all the normal podcasting places, as well as we post the video on YouTube as well. So go over to YouTube, like, subscribe, do all of the YouTube type things that I know you know how to do. But tonight, we have a special guest. Now, if you guys know me, you know that I'm big into CompTIA. I serve on a couple of things. I volunteer a lot, wearing the merch, because it's important to represent, right? And I think it's a really great organization. And one of the things that they do is they provide us with these types of reports. So my guest tonight is Carolyn April. She is a Senior Director of Industry Analysis. I hope I got all that correct at CompTIA. I've known her for quite a few years, and I love getting the data and stuff that they put out. If you're not watching the stuff that they do on their YouTube channel, it's absolutely incredible. Some of it's just really fun too, but a lot of great information comes through there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carolyn April. Carolyn, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Eric. I'm feeling like I should have worn my CompTIA merch, though. That would have been better. Next time we'll do wardrobe planning ahead of time, and I would have had my CompTIA shirt on for sure. But I'm psyched to be here. Really psyched. I love this show, and as you said, we've known each other for quite some years now, and have walked the walk and talked the talk about MSPs. So I'm pretty psyched.
Yeah. And CompTIA, even though it serves a much larger industry than just MSPs, because it has so many MSP members, that's kind of where it focuses a little bit, especially when it comes to some of this data. Now, I know that CompTIA produces lots of reports, but this one in particular is of interest to me because the state of the channel really tells me where the market is at any given time. So why don't you give me a little bit of history and what the state of the channel report is about?
Sure. So it's kind of cool this year because the state of the channel, this research report is our 10th. So we've done this now 10 times. It's been 11 years, believe it or not, because we skipped one year. I think it was a COVID oddball year. Something happened. But it's our 10th edition. So our marketing team is having a field day with that. So they get to play with it being the 10th. And I'm happy to say that I've been involved in all 10 of them. So I've been around the CompTIA for quite some time. So that's really exciting. This study is exclusive in terms of the sample and the respondents to the channel. So the people who answer the questions for this study are MSPs, they're solution providers. They are, IT and business consultants that work in the channel. They are hardware resellers. They are digital marketers in the channel. The funny thing is the definition of what the channel is has obviously expanded over the years. So the ecosystem, as you've heard that word used, is definitely a thing. So we've become much more inclusive in terms of our sample. But what you're hearing in the responses and in the data is it's your people, it's your tribe that's answering these questions. And it's been very interesting for me to see both the stability of the channel over these last 10 years, many things have remained the same, and also the amount of innovation and change that's happened. And they have kind of run in parallel. So you can't really, it's hard to describe the channel these days without saying that it is rooted in a very traditional foundation, and a lot of that has maintained over the years. And yet there's so much excitement in newer things, newer players, and newer dynamics between vendors and between distributors and everybody that plays in this space, that honestly, it just doesn't get boring. So one other thing I'll mention is it's international in flavor. We started adding an international component to any of our friends out there who are running businesses outside of the United States. The regions we cover with the study this year are the UK and Ireland, DACH, which is Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, grouped together, Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, Australia, New Zealand, which is one grouping, and then finally a new grouping in Asia called ASEAN. And I will not go through every one of those countries. Singapore is in there, English-speaking countries, not China involved. But we have separate reports that have been translated in a briefer format than the main report that is based on U.S. sample, and those are available too. So, Eric, if you've got any folks listening from overseas that would like a copy of a report in their own language, they can get it, which is kind of cool too.
Yeah, that's very cool, because the other thing that I've always seen in this industry, and I've been in it kind of a long time now, almost, afraid to admit how long, but one of the things you could always count on is that even though we were very much the same globally, a lot of times we were in different places in our paths, depending on where you were regionally. And so I imagine that the data is a little bit different, and it is going to change how they use this data in a go-to-market motion. So this is a sneak peek, obviously, to the report. When is the report actually coming out?
So the report will be published on May 9th. Barring any other, serious emergency, but I will tell you everything is moving along smoothly. So that will be available on May 9th, and that will be a full report. That's about 27 pages long, and that's all of the data that's based on the United States. That will also include the 5 regional briefs that I just described to you. And we go from there. The report will be available online in an HTML format. You can also get a PDF of any of those. So if you want to print it all out and take it with you and read it at your leisure, feel free to do that. And then typically these have a pretty long shelf life. So I'll work on this and I will present on this for the rest of the year, probably, at various events. So if you don't get a chance to, read the whole thing, you might see me pop up on a webinar, you might see me on my own podcast, whatever. But it's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention that ChannelCon is in Vegas this year.
It is. Yes, it is.
If nobody caught that, Vegas.
It is. So we will be in Vegas at the Venetian in the very beginning of August, I think, the very first few days of August, as always. Looking forward to it. And this study will play a pretty prominent role in what we talk about there.
Yeah, it usually does. And the presentations are very, very helpful. All right. So you told me I could show one slide.
I did.
So I'm going to go ahead and pull that slide up so that we can kind of start talking about some of these things. We're not going to go into a lot of detail because, of course, these are top secret until May 9th. So I want to make sure that you guys get, more into that. So, Carolyn, tell me some about, these stats that we're seeing right here.
Sure. So, it's really hard in a study of this breadth and depth to pick out, a handful of statistics that you want to highlight. So, you try to pull a few macro stats out, and these are some of the bigger takeaways from the study. Of course, there are many, and I should also mention that we do a lot of segmentation with this data. So, these are the stats that are the top lines of the data. So what everybody said. If you want to find out what just MSPs had to say about a particular question asked, or just companies of a certain size, we do segment by very small channel companies versus very large and the medium ones in between. You can go ahead and get that granular with it. And I know sometimes for your own business that helps to see what your specific peers are doing. And so anybody out there who would like a little slice and dice that's more customized, happy to do that. But what you're looking at here, these are some top lines. The first stat there, the 4.6 trillion, that's just the size of the tech market right now in Gartner's latest number. We don't do these sort of big sizing numbers of the whole global market. That's the one I pulled from Gartner, and it's a positive because after COVID, things were really kind of strange, and no one was sure what the spend was going to look like globally in terms of technology. How the market was going to shake out, and Gartner actually adjusted this number up very slightly, but still adjusted this up a couple of months ago. So all good there. I feel like the industry, despite the headlines you hear about layoffs at some of the biggest tech vendors, and we can talk about that because there's a weird dynamic going on there that really doesn't reflect the actual jobs market that is happening right now. But technology is sort of holding strong as an industry, and it typically runs stronger than most of the other verticals that we look at when we look at the jobs market, and that has continued to be the case even in the aftermath of the pandemic. So, Eric, I don't know if you want me to just sort of run through each of these. If we want to just kick off on one, I'm happy to do whatever. I'll field your questions, whatever you want to do.
Well, I think probably that jobs market thing is worthy of talking about for just a minute, because the headlines are full of these layoffs from the big tech companies, right? So how is that contrasting with what you're seeing here with the 4.6 trillion?
Well, the funny thing is, one of the, we've been asked about this a lot, right? So, there's these dire headlines, about the big, especially, the real mammoth companies in the tech industry, the Googles, the Metas, you name it, or just the Amazons, laying people off in droves. And yet, when you look at month-to-month unemployment rates, very low, if not the lowest. I think the last unemployment rate was one of the lowest we've had in a very long time. I'm not the expert at CompTIA on the job numbers, but it seems like there's something incongruous happening. It's like these big headlines, lots of layoffs on one hand. On the other hand, there are all these other tech companies out there that can't find people. They can't, find talent when they're looking for it. And they're chronically having open positions and struggling to find people in some of the key areas like cybersecurity, that they're desperate to find people with good skills. And so those two things don't really match up. It's like a dissonance that's going on between them. And one of the things that I've read tons on this is a lot of these bigger companies, if you think about it, economics wise, we've been living in an era for quite some time until very recently, where it was almost free to borrow money. There were, interest rates were nil to borrow money. And so as a result, a lot of these larger companies were willing, the Amazons and the Googles, they were willing to hire at an insane rate a number of people. And take the hit on that. It didn't matter right away if they were making a profit. It was about, trying to come up with the next best thing, and trying to grow revenue not necessarily being in line with how much money they were making on a profit level. And now what they're finding, as inflation went through the roof in the last year or so, is these companies realize, ooh, we have a lot of fat within our organizations. And I think that explains a lot of the layoffs. So they were able to trim out a ton of employees that they maybe didn't need all that much. And yet in other areas, they've decided to double down on hiring that in places that they do need. So there's a lot of discrepancy going on. And at the level of rank and file channel companies, we have not seen this devastation in terms of layoffs and in terms of worry about the same things that we're seeing with the larger companies. And I think that's very important to note. We see a lot of positivity. A lot of the stats that came back in this study were about, most channel companies feeling pretty good about the health of the channel, generally speaking. Most of them are realists, and many of the companies thought about, instead of growing revenue during the pandemic, many of them, continued to sell, obviously, but did a lot of soul searching when it came to efficiency, operational efficiency, and cost cutting, and making sure that their processes were about as tight as you could get them. And as an MSP, for those of you out there, that's really the name of the game. If you can be very efficient, have processes that are repeatable, that you don't have to customize and change all of the time, that in and of itself can really increase your bottom line profit wise without you even growing your sales. It's ideal if you're doing both, but a lot of companies figured out, ooh, we're bleeding in a lot of areas, and if we just tightened our belt here, there, and everywhere, and it doesn't even mean laying people off. It literally meant like being more efficient at what we're doing. That they were able to make pretty decent money and stay afloat during the pandemic. And I think that's something that the larger companies were not looking at. They were, they were spending and they were hiring, and now in retrospect, when they are faced with huge inflation rates on a lot of the lending they may or the borrowing they may have done, they've had to make course corrections. So I'll say course corrections.
Yeah, so I think MSPs in general and channel vendors as well were running more lean, just
Yeah.
because of the nature and size, average size of those businesses, right? I know a lot of MSPs are out there trying to hire right now. It's one of the biggest topics. Speaking of one of the biggest topics, one that's near and dear to me is that next number. The one is the loneliest number.
Yeah.
So the number one differentiator, um, competitive differentiator, and I love to talk about this one for a minute. So tell me what the data revealed to you in terms of customer experience and that competitive differentiator.
Yeah, this has become the thing that channel companies are realizing is their calling card. It's what's going to make them successful. As we have moved away from selling primarily hardware and infrastructure, don't get me wrong, lots of people still sell that. But as that being the definition of the channel, fundamentally in the past was as a hardware reseller, and moved more into professional services, managed services, consulting, all of the work that really project work, even that is not just about taking a product, selling it to a customer at a markup, and then taking the margin or the profit base there. It really becomes more about how you're selling to that customer and then the ongoing relationship. Well, that's about experience. And the life of the consumer is sort of leading the way here. So how you, Eric, and I interact with the providers in our life that help us, bring, cable television or streaming into our home, or help us in retail areas, or our interactions that we have with the medical industry, with our doctors, et cetera. We are pretty much rating those experiences, on a gold star basis, whether they were good. And a lot of us will decide not to take our business with companies that are just hard to do business with. There's a lot of friction. It's difficult to get support if something goes wrong. It's difficult to get a simple question answered. Well, nothing is different in the corporate world, the B2B world, where the channel is dealing with its customers. And we've done study after study, end user ones as well, where end users are saying, hey, yeah, we want the lowest price, or yeah, we want, the best product. Those things are really important to us. But if a company is difficult to do business with from, start to finish, that entire buyer's journey that we talk about, we'll go to number two in the market. We'll go to number three in the market in many cases, because it's that important to us to have a seamless relationship and an easy ongoing management of that relationship. So what that has meant is the channel has elevated this to number one thing that they focus on, is making sure that they are the face to the customer, which has always been a role the channel plays, but being making it as easy as possible for that customer to do business with them. Communicating in multiple ways, because as you know, customers, they're not monolithic. They don't all want to talk to you or get information from you one way. Everything comes through email, or everything comes through over the phone, or whatever you name your channel that you're going to use to get to your customers, but that you are willing to understand the personas of all of your customers, and then communicate with them in the ways that they prefer. Simple things. It sounds really simple. Oh, it's very difficult. And Eric, you could probably attest to this, especially for small MSPs, to try to be all things to all people. And sometimes that isn't possible. But trying to be the best steward of your customer experience to the set of customers that you do have is really a priority for at least the smart channel companies that are out there, because if they are not focusing on customer experience, they will get overlooked. Our data does show that. They won't find out they've been ghosted by a customer, or the customer's just going to take their business elsewhere and not let them know.
Yeah. I mean, earlier you and I were talking about my, eyeglasses and stuff like that. And I recently had to go through this with picking an optometrist, right? And literally
Okay, yeah.
I called an optometrist who was closed from noon to 2, or they didn't answer the phone from noon to 2, which
Yeah.
is most likely the time that I don't have anything scheduled in my day to be able to call them. And so I had to
Yep.
move on to somebody else, even though the rest of my family uses that optometrist.
Yep.
I mean, and,
And
and
it's
it's,
and it's little. And imagine if that's just one little split second thing that happened with you. Multiply that by how many potential customers that could be doing the same thing as you just did, going to another provider for that simple reason of they're not picking up the phone in this hour, and that can really hurt your business.
yeah, yeah. And I think for MSPs, because most of them deliver a service business, it's incredibly important to have that customer experience component. And you're right when you talked about it's hard to be all things to all customers, because the customer experience is really going to be best tweaked to a particular audience, to a particular vertical. And the other thing that I think is interesting, and I don't know if you've seen data on this or not, but I feel like partner experience has become a huge thing, because the partners, for whatever reason the dynamic is, they have a greater control over how they want to be treated. And they're actually driving some vendors to be successful and some vendors to be lagging because of
Mm-hmm.
the experience that that vendor has for them.
You are spot on. I mean, I would say one of the biggest changes in the channel over the 10 plus years that I've been doing this study is the leverage and the power dynamic has really changed. It used to be that the manufacturer or the vendor had all, they pulled all the strings. The route to market was linear. It was like the vendor moved their stuff through a distributor, through the channel to the customer. The channel providers were enrolled in a program that the vendor dictated. The terms, the incentives, the compensation was all just there, and that was what you had to follow along with. And you could move up into different tiers if you wanted to. But essentially, channel companies were an extension of the sales and delivery arm of the vendor. That's not the case today, as you said, Eric, especially with more of the channel companies being very services heavy. And the more services heavy you are, the less, and especially in a cloud era where things are really just, abstracted from view of the customer. The customer sees you and you provide services for them, but you're not no longer selling them, and I don't want to fill in the blank with specific vendors' names, but here's X vendor's router. I'm going to sell you this or whatever product it happens. Now you're telling them a business outcome you're going to work with them on, or how you're going to keep their network up and safe from a cybersecurity perspective, or whatever process or project it happens to be, or service that you're providing. But it's not a discussion about who the vendor is on the back end typically anymore, and that's provided partners with a little bit more power and more leverage in who they work with, which, to get to your original point, not to be long-winded, means that vendors really have to provide a good partner experience. So as much as partners need to work on customer experience, we have found in our data that last year we did a partner experience study specifically, and 50% of channel companies who took the survey said that in the last year they had dropped a vendor for the main reason they dropped the vendor was for poor partner experience. And the follow-up question was, did you drop that vendor even though you were still making money with that vendor? And the answer was yes for most of those partners. So that means the partners out there can be making money with you as a vendor. And if you aren't easy to work with, a lot of friction, don't take the support calls. Support's a big pain point. I know that was part of our data too. You'll get dropped, because the old days where there were only like 5 or 6 big vendors out there that you could choose to work with, 3 on the hardware side and 3 on the software side. Well, cloud blew that out of the water. Now there's thousands of vendors to work with, and a lot of them are quite good. So if you're not up to speed, you're not providing good partner experience, it isn't that much of a problem for a channel company to move on to somebody else. And they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we're coming up on time a little bit here. So I want to make sure that we get at least one more in. And
Sure.
actually, the one that I want to talk about is actually not on this screen,
Okay.
if it's okay. Because there's something that I took away from CCF that I thought was really interesting and really critical to the channel right now, and that is you said something about uh, the profit margins of MSPs or solution
Yeah.
providers that were going primarily to cloud, that you were seeing a big increase in profits for, the people that were kind of abandoning the on-premise stuff in favor of moving those workloads to the cloud.
I would say it was more about we saw more profitability when we asked the question, where are you seeing on average the most profit margin in the last couple of years? And then we gave them a list that they could choose from. And
Okay.
where partners were identifying the biggest profit margins, and that would just be general money making, that, not to get real granular between, operating margin and net margin and all that, but just where their perception and on average in the last year was that they were making the most money in these buckets that we allowed them to choose from. And it was all services related stuff. It was IT consulting services, business consulting services, managed services, and cloud subscription based sales and services. And they were making less profit margins, not surprisingly, honestly, on break fix, on hardware, straight up hardware sales, on software subscription, not subscription, but on licensed software, packaged, the old school software.
Right.
So that doesn't surprise me, because as we all know, services are certainly more lucrative. We've been, as those of us who work as analysts in this industry have been trying to talk to channel companies for more than a decade now to start thinking about moving into services, beyond simple product transactions, or do both, but definitely add a services component to what you do. So that wasn't surprising. The other thing, that, profit margins, most of the companies that answered the survey said they went up over the last couple of years. And most of us, sitting here, we screwed up our head and we're like, it was the pandemic. Why would you be making more money? And much of that has to do with, what I talked about earlier. A lot of companies, they may not have been selling as much. Revenue might have been down, but they were belt tightening extremely during the last couple of years. And for that reason, they were able to say, we may not have made as much money as we made in 2019 or 2018, but the margin was bigger. Because we tightened our belt, we were more efficient. Our costs, we lowered our costs. We didn't hire. We put a freeze on so that we didn't add new headcount. We worked in the confines of what we had. And that's how a lot of companies survived. Hopefully we're going to launch right out of that belt tightening, period soon. But I think that explains what looks to be, profitability that you wouldn't have expected during that time frame.
Awesome. So we've got 2 minutes left. So where do people find out more about the stuff that you're working on? Where are they going to find the report when it comes out on the 9th? Anything that you think people need to know?
Okay. Well, the report will be available on the CompTIA website. So that's a simple, easy breezy, CompTIA.org. Will be how you find it. It is called the State of the Channel 2023. Very basic, straight up title. So you'll be able to find that there. There will be a press release. So the morning of May 9th, you're likely, if you do the scan in the morning of the tech news of the day, there'll be a press release put out, and there'll be a link in that press release that will take you directly to the report. So if you don't feel like looking for it through our library or wherever it is, just look for that press release and you'll be able to click and get right to the report. I have a podcast called Volley, and that is an every other week podcast, and we're going to be discussing elements of this study over the next 2 podcasts. So if you're interested, you can find that. It's called CompTIA Volley like tennis. And that is on YouTube. So it's on the CompTIA Connect channel on YouTube. It's also on all the regular podcasters if you want to just do audio. But on YouTube, we do video. I'm trying to think where else. Be talking about it at ChannelCon, as we discussed earlier. And I'm an open door. So if people want to talk to me, we just really skated across the surface today. So there's so much in this report that I like to talk about. I kind of geek out on it. So if you ever want to email me, you can find me at CompTIA. Eric, you know where to find me. So if you have any of your listeners out there that want to get in touch, I'm happy to field questions, talk about that customization if you want it done for any of the specifics of your business, and webinars, whatever. I'm happy to do them. So you know where to find me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Carolyn. I really do appreciate you coming on and giving us this sneak peek of the state of the channel for 2023. Like I said, really important report, really important data that everybody from the vendors to the service providers in this industry can use to better generate their go-to-market for 2023. So again, thank you very much, Carolyn. Everybody else, let me just switch over for a second and say thank you very much for being here. I know that, this is probably not the best time to do a live stream. I'm working on it. We'll see where it goes. Who knows? We do this for fun, right? So, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, I appreciate that. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of the YouTube things. Join us in the Facebook group to make sure that you're part of the conversation, because that's where the community part of this really happens. And other than that, I will see you in the next one. Have a great evening.